Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. So we now come to the Q&A part with David Godman. So David Godman needs no introduction to devotees of Bhagavan. His life is a perfect illustration of the truth that it's Bhagavan who chooses his devotees. Arthur Osborne's book on the teachings of Ramana Maharshi literally fell into his hands when he was a student at Oxford University. He first visited Sri Ramanashramam in 1976 and served as the ashram librarian for 8 years. He's written extensively on the life and teachings of Bhagavan. Some of his best-known books include Be As You Are, Living by the Words of Bhagavan, and the 3-volume series, The Power of Presence, all masterpieces and treasures for devotees. I'm very happy he accepted our request to do a Q&A with us on this auspicious occasion of Bhagavan's 141st Jayanthi. We sent him 3 pages of questions, and he selected a few of them to address at this session today. Thanks, David. We look forward to listening to you. And you should be able to record your part if you wish.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sitting in a park in Australia, so there might be a few background noises once in a while. The first question I want to address right now is, what are the signs that we're making progress and that we are the recipients of Bhagavan's grace? This is very interesting for me, but there are 2 parts to this question. One is about feeling grace and the other is about making progress. I will talk about the progress aspect first. I used to go and sit with Lakshmana Swami, old devotee of Bhagavan, and for several years he had this maxim which he used to bring out regularly. He would say, it's the devotee's job to make the effort and it's the guru's job to ascertain the progress. The guru can't make the effort for you and the devotee can't ascertain his own progress. I think in many ways this is true. So long as you have a mind, so long as you're enmeshed in a situation where you think you're a person, then you have no capacity to evaluate your progress, to determine when that mind is going to end. I used to read a lot of biographies of various saints, and one thing that always struck me is how they always thought they were bad people, great sinners, had great egos, right up until the day they got enlightened or attained union with their God. So I think somehow if you're in a mind state, then you don't see the exit door and you have no capacity to say, it's next week, it's next year, it's in 5 lifetimes. Bhagavan told a story which I think illustrates this very well. I think it's from the Bhagavatam because it involves Narada, Vishnu and a couple of meditating sadhus. There were 2 sadhus meditating in a forest, and Narada passed by on his way to see Vishnu. And so the senior of the 2 sadhus, who rather fancied he was a great sadhu about to get enlightened, said, go and ask Vishnu how long I've got until I get enlightened, and come back and report. So Narada went off to Vishnu, got the news, came back, and told the first sadhu, Vishnu's checked you out, and you've got 5 more lifetimes to go. This really upset the man. He said, I've been doing tapas all my life. I know I've done it before. I'm much closer than that. This must be an incorrect reading. He was upset. And then Narada turned to the other sadhu and said, I've checked you out. Vishnu's checked you out as well. You've been meditating under this tamarind tree. Vishnu says that you've got many, many more lives. Your lives are as many as the leaves on this tree. Now, tamarind trees are very big and their leaves are very, very tiny. So as many as the leaves on an adult tamarind tree means thousands and thousands of lives. The junior sadhu was actually delighted by this prognosis. He said, oh, this is wonderful news. Vishnu has personally given me the assurance that one day I'm going to get enlightened. This is part of my destiny. I'm so happy that one day I'm going to get enlightened, even though it looks like right now it's a long time in the future. The moment he said this, a wind arose, blew all the leaves off the tree, and as the last leaf touched the ground, he attained liberation. So the prophecy was correct. When all the leaves went, he attained liberation. I think when Bhagavan told this story, the moral was that the first sadhu was very arrogant, overestimated his capacity, and the second sadhu was very humble, and it was his surrender and humility which brought about his liberation. I would also take it to be an illustration of what I've been saying, that you really don't have any idea where you are on the path. One person might think they're nearly there, another person might have no clue, but then be totally happy to be told they have thousands of lifetimes to go. There is one way that Bhagavan himself said that we can ascertain our progress. Somebody asked him this very same question, and how can I tell if I'm making progress in my practice? And Bhagavan said, to whatever extent you are free from unwanted thoughts, to that extent you are making progress. Now that's a very simple, straightforward, seemingly simple way of seeing where you are. The problem with that, of course, is how many among us can actually honestly say that we are free from unwanted thoughts, even for 5 minutes, much less compare our progress to this week, last year. I think probably a more reasonable way of looking at this is to see how enthusiastic we are about going back to the source, about holding on to the I, how often we check our mind. My feeling is, if you are keen about your practice, if your mind is always going towards the divine, if it's always going to the I, then that's a sign of your progress. If huge chunks of your life are simply dissipated in daydreams, then perhaps you're not making as much progress as you thought. Going back to the story with the two sadhus, Vishnu gave a categorical assurance to the junior sadhu that one day he would get enlightened. And Bhagavan has given us the same assurance. In Arunachal Ashtakam verse 8, he talks about the birds flying in the air. And he says the birds fly around, but they can't stay up there forever. Sooner or later, gravity and tiredness will force them back to the ground. And this is his metaphor for the jivas, the minds flapping around. He said, we can go our own way, we can jump up and down, we can make all our efforts, but sooner or later, weariness will bring us back to the ground, and at that point we'll land because we can't stay up there forever. I like this. We all have an assurance from Bhagavan that sooner or later it's going to be our moment, our day. The story of the bird also reminds me of a really good story that I only discovered in a notebook by Sadhu Nathananda many years ago. He said that in the early years of Ramanashram, there was a chimney in the old hall. The old hall was originally built as a kitchen dining room, but when it was made, Bhagavan moved in and it became the place where he lived, and a new dining hall was built next door. But if you look at the pictures of the old hall in the late 20s, early 30s, there's a big chimney sticking out of the top, and underneath at ground level there was a fireplace where cooking was supposed to have taken place, but it never happened. Once Bhagavan moved in there, some wire mesh was placed across the top of the chimney, but the bottom remained open. And of course, in Bhagavan's early years, the doors to the old hall were never closed. So one day, a bird flew in through the doors of the old hall, went to the entrance where the fireplace was, went up the chimney, and of course got stuck because it couldn't escape through the top. It spent a lot of time flapping around in there, and the devotees at the bottom were trying to entice it down, which of course made it more and more scared, more and more frightened, and it kept shooting up this chimney, banging its head and wings against the top, getting nowhere at all. Bhagavan watched this and came up with this lovely metaphor for enlightenment. He always had good stories connected to the world around him. He said this bird is like the I, the jiva, rising up. It thinks the way out, the way to safety is always upwards, never downwards. It goes up, it shoots up, it can't get out of the top because the mesh is there, but it never occurs to it that safety is down at the bottom. However, we go to the bottom and try and rescue it and bring it back to the source, the bottom. It has no interest, it just panics and runs away. So you imagine this as a gigantic metaphor. We have Bhagavan at the bottom of the chimney, we have a jiva inside, always convinced that we have to run away, that we have to run upwards and outwards. Bhagavan's patiently waiting for us at the bottom, but we're not interested in that. We're determined to go our own way. We're pushing upwards and upwards. We're injuring ourselves, we're panicking. We think the solution is to go upwards and outwards. Bhagavan is at the bottom waiting for us to get tired out. And at one point we surrender, we give up, and slowly we sink to the bottom. Either we do this by acknowledging that there's nothing out there that's going to make us happy. We do this by inquiry, or we do it by surrender. And slowly the jiva bird will sink back to the bottom. And there is Bhagavan waiting for us to put us into permanent safety. The next aspect of this is grace. Grace is different from progress. Natyananda, who told the story about the bird, he wrote in his book, Sri Ramana Darshanam, Bhagavan is always bestowing grace. There is never a moment when he's not bestowing it, and there's never a moment when we're not receiving it. People, devotees would come and they'd sit before Bhagavan and say, oh, Bhagavan, I'm not making any progress. I'm stuck. On one of these occasions, Bhagavan laughed and said, Grace made you aware of me in your native place. Grace decided to send you to Ramanashram. You came. Grace put you in front of me, and it made you stand before me and make this complaint that you're not feeling the grace. Your very presence here complaining disproves your complaint. So we are, as Bhagavan sometimes said, like the fish in the water complaining of being thirsty while we're being immersed in the water all the time. If you are complaining you're not receiving the grace, it proves at that moment the grace is operating within you. You're just not registering it in the way that you think you should. We claim we're not feeling the grace because we want to judge it by the wrong criteria. We want our life's problems to be solved. We want our family and personal circumstances to be improved according to our desires. When we don't get what we want, we say we're not feeling the grace. We want to succeed in spiritual practice. And when we get stuck in that, we say we're not feeling the grace, and we run off to Bhagavan and complain. I would say that choosing to make an effort to do any kind of practice, to have any association with Bhagavan, is practical proof that we're all feeling the grace. And I would also say that any kind of effort to put Bhagavan's teachings into practice increases the flow of the grace. The grace is always there, it's brought us to him, but the more we try to put the teachings into practice, the more we experience the flow of that grace. I think that first story I told about the sadhus under the tree comes from Bhagavatam. There's another verse which Bhagavan cited, and he said, when you take one step towards God, God takes 9 steps towards you. So you making the effort to move towards God initiates a massive and disproportionate response from God. He moves massively towards you and gives you the grace. The corollary of this story is if you don't make the effort, then God is probably not interested in making any reciprocal flow of grace towards you. You have to take the initiative, you have to make the start, but as soon as you do, there's a massive and disproportionate response from the divine. Going back, before I continue, I was going back to the story when I had the expanded metaphor of Bhagavan at the bottom of the chimney, bird flapping to find its way out. I think we say that we don't feel the grace because we're not looking in the wrong direction. we're not looking in the right direction, we're looking in the wrong direction. Take the perspective of this bird in the chimney. The bird is looking upwards and outwards. It thinks its safety is up in the air, away from the base. It's continually trying to find its safety and its freedom by extroverting upwards and outwards. Bhagavan is sitting quietly at the bottom, waiting for us to find out the truth that he's there, looking at us inside all the time in the heart. There's a lovely series of verses in Padamala where Bhagavan talks about this. And in one of them he says, why do you complain that I'm no longer looking at you? If you would look inside, turn your attention 180 degrees, you'll find me looking at you. I am always there in the heart, giving darshan to you, but you're looking outwards all the time in the opposite direction. And so you complain that you're not getting the darshan, you're not receiving the grace. To become aware of the grace, all we have to do is go back down that metaphorical chimney, if you like, or turn our attention to the bottom of it. And there is Bhagavan smiling at us the whole time. So that's question one. The next one. How does one recognize karma that is conducive to spiritual growth and learn to avoid getting entangled in unnecessary karma that is not spiritually beneficial? I picked out this question because there's a ready-made answer, because long ago Ramaswamy Pillai asked an almost identical question to Bhagavan. He went up to him and said, Bhagavan, there are so many choices in this life, so many things we could or couldn't do. How can we tell if a particular option or choice that presents itself is something that's good for us, something that will increase our spiritual progress? And how can we tell if a particular option is something that's just going to waste our time or be bad for us? Bhagavan laughed. I will give you his answer and then I'll explain it in a little detail because it's not an obvious, clear answer. Bhagavan laughed and he said, throw it off your head 3 times, and if it jumps back 3 times, it's something you have to do. Now, in Tamil culture, there's a notion that your destiny is a large bundle that you carry on top of your head. You trudge around your life with this heavy weight on top of you. So what Bhagavan is saying is that if a choice comes along, something new, don't jump into it. Don't say, aha, I'll do this. Just ignore it, throw it away. If it comes back a second time, don't accept it. Don't think, oh, I've got to do this. Throw it off your head again. But if it jumps back a third time, then it's probably something you have to do. And you get on with it, but have a filter system. Don't take on new stuff. Don't immediately jump at things and say, I have to do them. Try to keep your life simple, if you like. Don't accept every new thing that comes your way. Push them aside until finally you realize you don't have any choice in this. Many years ago, I was in Mumbai sitting with the Sagadatta, and he gave an almost identical answer to a young couple who'd come in to talk to him. And like many young couples with kids, they were complaining about being busy and having too many things in their lives. And they asked Maharaj what they should do. And he said, don't take on any new obligations. And every time you manage to wriggle out of any that you already have, rejoice. So I think this is a different, but very similar response to what Bhagavan gave. Consider all the things that are going to complicate your life. Try to reject them. Don't take on new things. Keep your life simple so you have time for your duties, your obligations, and also for your practice. This is a level of answer that assumes that we do actually have a choice. And having given these 2 answers, one from Bhagavan and one from Maharaj, I should also point out that Bhagavan on most occasions said we don't actually have a choice at all about what we do. We have a prarabdha, a destined script. All the actions our body is going to undergo are somehow fixed. People used to say, even picking up this fan, and they'd pick up a fan, or moving this cup, and he'd say, yes, yes. So we don't really have choices, except for one really, really big one. Bhagavan said that we always have the choice not to identify with the body which is performing its destined activities. So we may not have the choice to ignore some option that comes up. It's the deliberating over it, the deciding yes or no would probably be part of the script anyway. But what we do have is an innate capacity to look at the I am the doer idea that we live with all our life and to say, no, no, that's not true. I am not the doer. We have a choice to look at the I, to be aware of what it's doing. And we have a moment-to-moment ability, a choice to say, no, this is not me. This is not the true me. My I is different. This is the process of self-inquiry. And Bhagavan seems to indicate that though all of our actions have some kind of deterministic script underlying them, we do moment to moment have this capacity to say, no, I am not this person doing this. And slowly, slowly we sever ourselves from this persistent and pernicious notion that we are the body, and we go back to the state of being the self in which actions simply take place, but there's nobody there saying, I'm doing this or I'm choosing to do that. I started this answer with Ramaswamy Pillai's story of the head load, which had to be thrown off 3 times. As anyone who has read Bhagavan's literature will know, that the analogy of the head load was one that he used quite a bit. He would say, when you're a passenger on a train, you have 2 choices. You can stand in the corridor with your head load and suffer, or you can sit on the seat, put your head load on the luggage rack and enjoy the ride. Either way, you're going to get to the destination at the same place. Sitting down and letting go of your load is surrender. It's also inquiry. Standing up with the load on one's head is not challenging the I am the doer myth. If you get rid of your load by giving up the I am the doer idea through inquiry, or if you do it through surrender, you can sit on the train, you can relax. Your destination will be the same. You simply avoid a lot of work and struggle along the way. Question 3. What books do you most recommend to seekers? I picked this one out not because I have a list of books to recommend or promote, because I have a completely different take on spiritual literature. I get asked this question occasionally, and nowadays I simply tell people any books that contain the words of jnanis are the books that you should be reading, and the rest, don't bother with them. And I'm not saying this simply because jnanis have authoritative things to say. They of course realize the self and they can give you practical advice on how to get there. I'm not saying this is why you should read the words of jnanis. I'm saying that if you read the words of jnanis with a quiet, empty mind, then there's a power in them which has the capacity to reveal the state that those jnanis are talking from and pointing at. So when somebody like Bhagavan says, you are consciousness, you are the self, you are Brahman, you can file that away as information in your head, or you can listen to those words resonate inside yourself. And if you accept those words with a quiet, empty mind, the energy contained in that utterance from a jnani has the capacity to reveal your own consciousness to yourself. So in a way, the words of the jnanis are not primarily instructions to be carried out. They're revelations of who you are. And if you can read them, if you can listen to them in the right state, then those words in and of themselves have the capacity to show you your true state. The power of the jnani's word is truly immense. I will tell you a couple of stories. there was a professor in the 1940s who came to Bhagavan, chemistry professor, and he used to go back to Chennai every Sunday afternoon to his family, his job. And as was the custom on these occasions, you went to Bhagavan Sunday afternoon and said, "May I take leave?" You don't say, "Bhagavan, I'm off back to my family." That the cultural tradition is you ask permission by saying, "May I take leave?" So he went to see Bhagavan, and Bhagavan just looked at him and said one word, "Iru." Iru in Tamil is the imperative of the verb to be, the verb to stay. That one word completely transformed him. It put him into the state of self. He went back to his room in Ramana. He sat there and he stayed there for the rest of his life, more or less absorbed in the self. This was the devotee who later became known as Tinai Swami. Tinais are the benches outside people's houses. He sat on a bench outside the house in Sadhuram's compound for many years and got the name Tinai Swami. But the one word from Bhagavan put him in the state, kept him in that state, and remained in it for the rest of his life. Another example I can give is Akalandama. Now, I like her because she is a lady who had no intellectual background at all. She was a child widow who spent her whole life serving sadhus, one of which was Bhagavan. She was the premier target of her service, if you like. So she turned up at Virupaksha cave one day on a full moon day. In those days, Bhagavan would get his head shaved. Devotees said, now is the perfect opportunity to go and ask for some upadesha from Bhagavan. Full moon day is very auspicious. Go up and ask Bhagavan for some upadesha. And she said, but I don't know what to say. And against her better judgment, she was pushed to the front and went up to Bhagavan, and he looked inquiringly like, what do you want? And all she could say was, well, tell me something. And Bhagavan said, well, what do you want to know? And she said, well, I've just been pushed up here by somebody else who said it was a good and auspicious day to get some upadesha from you. Bhagavan realized what had happened, and he looked at her and said in a very literary, philosophical way, be without letting go of yourself. Now, that's not the kind of injunction that you generally give to an illiterate lady of that era. I don't think he was expecting her to understand it. These were words of power. These were directed at her consciousness, to activate her consciousness, and to put it into the state that he himself was in and that he was directing it to by giving this utterance. So I love Akalandama's response to this. She talked about this in an interview she gave with Sadhuram, and he wrote a little book about her. And she said, let the Pandits discuss and debate what this high-flown sentence might mean. She said, I myself had no need to think about it, discuss it, ponder it, because the moment Bhagavan said those words, he put me in the state that the words were pointing at. She in another record of her early visits, said that Bhagavan would just look at people in those days, this is the first decade of the last century, and put people into the state of being in the heart just by looking at them. So she definitely had this experience in the first decade of the last century. Bhagavan uttered a powerful phrase that came from his own self. It penetrated Akalandama, activated her consciousness, her beingness, and in that moment, she too became aware of what Bhagavan was pointing at by direct experience. One analogy I think I like with this is, imagine you're a goalkeeper. Your mind is a goalkeeper, and Bhagavan's on the penalty spot, kicking the ball at you. You think it's your job to save the ball, keep it out of the net, catch it, kick it away, and you feel very pleased with yourself. When Bhagavan tells you something, you think, he's telling me something, I have to do something about it. So that's you being the goalkeeper, catching it, feeling pleased that you've caught it and throwing it away. That's not your job at all. Your job is to get out of the way. The mind, the receiver, the goalkeeper just gets in the way of what Bhagavan is trying to do. He's trying to put his words into your heart where they will activate themselves and reveal the truth of who you are. He's not asking you to intervene. Think about them, juggle them, and feel pleased with yourself that you've got a good intellectual understanding of what he's saying. He's simply saying, you are Brahman, you are the self, this is who you are, and hopefully, if your mind is quiet enough, you experience it for yourself. Back in the 1980s, I was putting together the book that eventually became Be As You Are. I did this the old-fashioned way. There were no computers in those days. I simply got copies of all the ashram books, and I had a pair of scissors, and I snipped out all of the conversations where Bhagavan gave out his teachings and arranged them in files and folders according to what the topic was. So I'd have a little pile about surrender, maybe one on creation, one on karma. Before I started this, I just assumed that most of what Bhagavan talked about was practice, that there'd be a huge pile of cuttings on self-inquiry, another pile on surrender, maybe another pile on japa, yoga. What surprised me after I'd completed my cuttings collection, that by far the largest pile was Bhagavan saying, you are self, you are consciousness, you are Brahman. This is called confirmation bias. I think we all read Bhagavan and we're looking for a solution, we're looking for something to do. So our attention tends to slide over the bits of the text where he said, there isn't anything to do. You are Brahman, your consciousness, accept it, be one with it. And we say to ourselves, yes, 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 but what do I do? This isn't really the correct response to all these powerful utterances from Bhagavan. He is telling us this because he knows it's who we are, and he wants us to receive those words in silence. And if we do so, then we become one with him and we experience the same state that he does. There is a verse that he used to quote from an old Tamil text, and the gist of it is, the guru who tells you to do this or that is just adding to your karma. He's keeping you enmeshed in the cycle of births and deaths. But the one who, through the power of his word and the power of his silence, puts you into the same state that he perpetually abides in, he is the guru. The wind has blown something over here. Question. It is important to preserve Bhagavan's teachings in their purity for posterity. There is so much dilution and distortion of the teaching to suit people's own needs and temperament. How can we do our parts as devotees and volunteers of the ashram to help with this preservation? I put this question in because I have another lovely little story that illustrates my answer to this very well. About 40 years ago, there was a Bhagavan function in Bangalore, and the guest of honor was Swami Chinmayananda. Chinmayananda was founder of the Chinmaya mission. He had come to see Bhagavan. He'd been very impressed by him. He was definitely a devotee. He was the editor of The Call Divine, which was the first introduction that contained and promulgated Bhagavan's teachings. He was introduced by A.R. Natarajan, who was running the Bangalore Center at the time. And A.R. Natarajan was very enthusiastic about spreading Bhagavan's teachings throughout the world. And in his introduction, he said it was his goal to try to get millions of devotees to come to Bhagavan and follow and practice his teachings. Swami Chinmayananda gave him a kind of rather peculiar look, and then he stood up and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Natarajan, but I think you've got this all wrong. He He said, the more accurately you explain Bhagavan's teachings, the fewer people you will find are actually interested in following them. If you succeed in getting millions of new people to follow Bhagavan, that will only be a measure of the extent to which you've diluted or watered down his teachings. So I think there's something to be said for this, that there is a need to keep Bhagavan's teachings pure, to keep them accurate, and there's a niche job for a few devotees, possibly including myself, to go back to the original sources, to sift out what are the reliable teachings, to make sure that the correct teachings are available, and not to water them down or bring inaccuracies into them. But I don't think that's a job for the vast majority. As I mentioned in the previous answer, there is a power in Bhagavan's words. Those words are easily available. The job for the vast majority of devotees is not to nitpick the original sources, to try to find out what's reliable and what's not. The job of the vast majority of us is to listen to those words in silence, to let those words do their work, and to become one with the source that those words come from. A long time ago, back in the 1970s, I talked to Nisargadatta about the power of the Guru's word, and during the course of the conversation, I said, I came to you because I happened to read I Am That. You were alive. Somehow I felt drawn here to come and see you because you're still here. Your words silenced me. I'm just wondering, will the power of those words still be there to devotees in the future, people who don't have the opportunities to see you in person? And Nisargadatta said, what I'm talking about is not bound by time. The self is not governed by time. Therefore, the power in the words is not time bound. If somebody picks up this book in 20 years' time, 100 years' time, even 10,000 years' time, if they are mature enough to be receptive to what these words are saying, then those words will have the same effect then as they do when they come out of my mouth inside this room. I think this is very useful comment because we are now 70 years on from when Bhagavan passed away. We don't have the opportunity to sit in his presence and hear his words directly from his own mouth, but we do have them on the printed page, and I accept Nisargadatta's assurance. I accept that there is a power in Bhagavan's words. It's not bound by time, and that if anyone tunes into those words, if people listen to them with a quiet, empty heart, then they will find the source of our being and they will put us into that being. I only have a couple of minutes left, so I will just tell one other story about Nisargadatta, because it really illustrates what I've just been talking about. I was having a friendly argument with him. He liked people to argue with him. I was saying, last week you said this, the week before you said something else, they can't both be true. And in a very genial, good-natured way, he humored me, gave me explanations, tried to explain what he was meaning on one day and what he was meaning on another. And then finally he said, David, I don't think you really understand the purpose of my words. He said, I'm not giving you these words so that you can arrange them in some kind of philosophy that makes sense. I'm giving these words because I'm trying to plant them inside your consciousness. If you think about them, if you discuss them, if you argue about them, then you impede the effectiveness of those words. He said, I'm going to plant my words in your consciousness. They will grow, they will make shoots, they will flower and fruit in their own time. but every time you think about them too much, you impede their growth. So thinking about them, discussing them is a bit like putting the weed killer on them. If you allow my words to settle into your being and don't think about them, don't discuss them, don't argue about them, then they will do their work, and you yourself will become that consciousness that I'm talking about. And then he glared at me and said, now shut up and let the words do their work. So that's my advice to anyone who wants to live in the world of Bhagavan's words. Listen to the words quietly, silently. Let the power that Bhagavan put into those words do their work, and let those words and the power behind them put you in the state of self. Thank you.